It is crazy to think that there has almost been 10 generations of mainline Pokemon games. When you combine that with the anime and spin-offs and trading card game, this multimedia franchise has enough content to last you a lifetime. But I want to look to the future because I am so excited about the future of Pokemon. If Gen 10 comes out in 2026, it'll line up with the 30th anniversary of the franchise. And I really hope, because this is Generation 10, that they make it a celebration of everything that's come before it. So today, what I want to do is I want to take a look at the past 30 years of mainline Pokemon games and use some of the best aspects of each one to build the ultimate Gen 10 game. So a couple ground rules for what we're doing today to build this hybrid Frankenstein Pokemon game. There's been 9 generations and there's going to be 10 categories that we choose from today. I'm only allowed to use each generation once, except for one repeat to fill in that 10th gap. We're going to take a look at these 10 categories, pick the best aspect from the past Pokemon games to fill in, and combine them to create a celebration of the past 30 years of Pokemon. So first up, we have to start with the region. And there have been a ton of great Pokemon regions, but the region that I'm going to go back to for Generation 10 is Kalos from Generation 6, X and Y. There's a couple reasons I love this region. First off, it was the first region that we got to see in 3D, and even though I don't think it's aged that great, that was something incredible to see. I remember picking up my pre-order of X and turning on the game and seeing the Kalos region in 3D and thinking, wow, this is the future of Pokemon. There were some awesome environments such as Lumio City, which felt grand. It felt like this big place that you can explore, and it was just a really special time to be in Pokemon during that time. But I also think that it is a region that has the most capability to go back and fill in things. For example, there were whole areas like the power plant where there were just doors that were locked that you couldn't access. How great would it be to go back to that region and fill in some of those missing gaps in order to make an even better game? Now, in the future, we do have Pokemon Legends Z through A coming out, so they might already be planning some of this stuff that I'm talking about, but we'll have to wait and see what that's like. Now, for our second category, after we discover our region, we have to pick our Pokemon professor. And my favorite professor that I've always had a soft spot for is Generation 2 Professor Elm. I've always loved his personality. He kind of had this head in the clouds, obsessed with his research kind of personality. And I thought the thing that he was researching in Generation 2, breeding, was an awesome new mechanic introduction, and I would love to see that expanded because I spent so much time breeding for competitive Pokemon, so much time breeding for shinies. I think that Professor Elm and his role as the breeding expert would be an awesome thing to go back to. Now, more recent Pokemon games have made breeding even easier to do. You can get competitive Pokemon in a very short time. So I would love to see what else they could do with the breeding mechanics, and Professor Elm would be a great teacher showing you how to do these new aspects of the game. But now that we have a professor, we have to go with our starters, starting with our grass starter. And for the grass starter, I am going with Generation 7's Rowlet. Rowlet is just an adorable Pokemon. I love him. If you watch the anime, he had a great personality. I think that the inspiration, the real world inspiration from stilt owls going extinct in Hawaii is a really cool real world reference, and I love the fact that it plays into his ghost typing when he becomes Decidueye. His signature move, Spirit Shackle, I thought was a great move. I thought he was a lot of fun to play with. He was my dedicated false swiper on my Gen 7 team for catching Pokemon, and I just love Rowlet, so he would be my pick for our grass starter. Now we're moving on to our fire starter, and I'm going to be honest with you, this was the last thing on this list that I picked, and the only generation that I hadn't used was Generation 8, and I tried to see, can I move some things around so that I'm not cheating, and I finally decided that I'd use Generation 8 for the fire starter because we have Scorbunny. Now, Scorbunny is not my favorite fire starter, but I do think he's unique for a couple reasons. One, he's one of the few fire starters that actually keeps his monotype fighting. I think he's got a really cool theme as a soccer player. I'm American, we call it soccer. Although that might be a fault for me because as a nerd, I really don't watch any sports, so I couldn't tell you the first thing about soccer. But I think he's a unique Pokemon with a lot of personality, and if you watched him in the anime with Go, and as his journey as he evolved into a Cinderace, I thought that was a lot of fun. So I'd pick Scorbunny from Generation 8 as my fire starter. And for our last starter, our water star, there is only one choice for me. We have to go with Mudkip. He was the star of a whole generation of 2000s memes. He is adorable. He is based on an axolotl, which is a unique creature in and of itself, and his Mega evolution for Mega Swampert was my go-to Mega. I loved using him on rain teams. So yeah, Generation 3 Mudkip, he's our water starter. For the next category, let's talk about the visual style of the games. I already talked about how in X and Y, I loved the jump to 3D, but I don't think it has aged that well. I think that a lot of the charm and personality of Pokemon games, while it's still there and I love the franchise and I always have a ton of fun with it, I think the visual style has faltered a little bit. So I would love to go back to the sprite era of Pokemon with those cool animations, those different poses. I think that's when Pokemon's art direction was at its height, and the best sprite work was done in Generation 5. So I would go back to the sprite style of Pokemon, and the best sprite work that you could find was in Generation 5. I think there were some really unique animations, some really great poses that they had, and the way that they showed cutscenes was really creative given the limitations of the time. So I would like our visual style to look like Generation 5. Now, most Pokemon games for the past generations have had some sort of gimmick, so we have to pick a gimmick for this generation. Now, I've already used Gen 6, because my favorite gimmick is Mega Evolutions. I remember waiting for the Korokoro leaks to come out so that you could see the new Mega Evolutions and you could see what type of Pokemon were going to get an updated form. It really kind of changed the competitive for a while. It was really interesting, these Pokemon that weren't used getting Mega Evolutions. But although it was my favorite thing, I do think that it became stale really quick. And although I'd love to see new Megas, I got really tired of fighting Mega Kangaskhan in every single online battle and having to switch in my Rocky helmet so that the parental bond didn't kill me. So I think that the best gimmick that is usable in VGC is terrestrializing. I think it's a really simple concept of changing Pokemon's type, but I think it opens up a lot of options in the gameplay, and I hope it sticks around for a while because I think it's a lot of fun, and I love that any Pokemon can use it. And yeah, so I would go with Generation 9's terrestrializing. So now that we're setting off in our Pokemon journey, we have to talk about who we'll be battling, and that is our villainous team. There are a lot of really complicated teams, Team Galactic, Team Plasma, and I think they have really great story arcs, but for this part of the game, I want to keep it simple, and I would just go with Generation 1's Team Rocket. They are just straight up bad dudes. There's grunts, there's bosses. I think they just make good villains because they're just simple, they're evil. They don't really have a motivation, they just want to get rich, and don't we all want that? Not only that, but Giovanni, I think, is a great boss character. He is a mobster, he's smart, he's cunning, he leads this team, and he's got ties to the creation of Mewtwo, which I think makes him an even cooler character. So yeah, for our villainous team, I would go with Gen 1's Team Rocket. So now we've finished collecting all the gym badges, we beat Giovanni for that 8th badge. Who is going to be our champion? And I think we all know there's only one answer. It may seem like fan service, but we have to go with Generation 4's Cynthia. Her team is just iconic. I don't think her team is actually as hard as people make it out to be, but you can't deny that it's iconic, and it was a well-built team. Not only is she a great battler, but she has appearances in, I think, Generation 5 and Generation 7 as well. She's got ties to the legendary Pokemon. She plays a really big role in the story. So I think she's just an awesome character all around, and she will be the champion of our game. So Generation 4's Cynthia. So we've chosen something for every generation in the past. We have to go to our last category, which means it's going to be some repeat, and that category is the post game. So you had things like the Battle Frontier and Gen 3. Generations 8 and 9 have done some great DLC. So what did I pick for my post game? I picked Generation 2. And I know that may be a cop-out because basically Generation 2 allows you to go back to a whole nother region and battle a new set of gyms and complete a whole second part of the story. And I would love to see that. And since we chose Generation 6 Kalos region as our region for the game, that's based on France. France is very close to England. It's very close to Spain. So how cool would it be if in the post game we could get to go to Paldea or Galar and battle the gyms and complete a secondary story there. I think that would make the best post game. Plus, in Gen 2, the final battle is against Red. So how cool would it be if we had an option to go battle past champions, references to older games, celebrating the 30 years of Pokemon history? So yeah, that is my favorite things from the past 9 generations of games that I would use to build the ultimate Gen 10 game. There's been a lot of highs and lows in Pokemon franchise. There were things like cutting the national decks, which were a real bummer, but I understand why they did it, because it allowed the developers to work on other parts of the games, and now with over 1,000 Pokemon, that's a really daunting task. But I really hope for Gen 10 that they make it a celebration of the past 30 years, they take their time, and they do things like the national decks, they do things like connecting the regions, they do things that are going to be a celebration of the past 30 years of Pokemon, and make this a really, really unique game that is a celebration for the fans that have played all the prior generations. So let me know in the comments down below, what are your favorite elements of the past 9 generations of Pokemon games? How would you build your ultimate Gen 10 game? Let me know down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you nerds later.